not random acts of violence.
I wasn't born bad.
Like a wolf might, when it's had a taste of blood, it's going to come back for it again. That is a mark of a serial killer.
She could have gotten away with it.
The rage got more and more and more.
How do you get this person off the street before they kill again?
Those men were shot, just shot. So boom, boom, boom. You know, they weren't cut up, they weren't sliced up, no OJ jazz.
Greetings, it's Gabe Morales here, continuing with our True Crime Profile series. All of the individuals depicted thus far have been males. Today's story is a little bit different. Aileen Carol Wournos was an American serial killer, active between 1989 and 1990. And while engaging in prostitution along highways in the state of Florida, she robbed and shot dead 7 male clients. Now, I recall seeing Billy Crystal host the Academy Awards, and before he presented the Best Actress Award to Charlize Theron for her portrayal of Wournos in the movie Monster, he joked, "I will never pick up a prostitute ever again." That movie scared the shit out of me. Indeed, with all the makeup, it was hard to even recognize Theron in the movie, and it was a very scary insight into the mind of a female serial killer. Wournos was born as Aileen Carol Pittman on February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan. Her mother was Diane Wournos and was only 14 years old when she married Aileen's 18-year-old father, Leo Pittman, in 1954. In 1959, her mother gave birth to her older brother, Keith, and after less than 2 years of marriage and 2 months before Aileen was born, Diane filed for divorce from Leo Pittman, and she gave birth to Aileen at the age of 16. Aileen Wournos never met her father. Leo Pittman was later sentenced to life in prison for kidnapping and raping a 7-year-old girl. Pittman was diagnosed with schizophrenia and committed suicide by hanging while he was in prison in 1969. In early 1960, Diane Wournos abandoned her 2 children, leaving them with her parents, which would have been Aileen and Keith's grandparents, Lori and Britta Wournos, both of whom were alcoholics. They legally adopted Keith and Aileen in March 1960. So as you can tell thus far, Aileen Wournos had a very rough young life. By the age of 11, she started engaging in sexual activities in school in exchange for cigarettes, drugs, and food. It is also alleged that she had incest, sexual relations with her brother Keith. Wournos said that her grandfather had sexually assaulted her and beaten her many times when she was a child. And before beating her, he would force her to strip off her clothes and look at her before he raped her. In 1970, at the age of 14, she became pregnant, having been raped by a family friend. Wournos gave birth to a baby boy at a home for unwed mothers in 1971, and the child was placed up for adoption. A few months after her son was born, she dropped out of school, and about that same time, her grandmother died of liver failure due to heavy drinking. When Wournos was 15, her grandfather threw her out of the house, and she states she began living in the woods near the home and supported herself through prostitution. There is no doubt that she was damaged mentally, physically, and spiritually. In 1976, Wournos hitchhiked to Florida, where she met a 69-year-old yacht club president named Louis Gratz Fell. They married quickly, and the announcement of their nuptials were printed in the local newspaper. But Wournos was a substance abuser and continually got herself into confrontations at local bars. It is said that she also hit Fell with his own cane, which caused him to put out a restraining order against her within weeks of their marriage. She then returned from Florida to Michigan, where she was arrested in July 1976 and charged with assault and disturbing the peace after she threw a cue ball at the bartender's head. A few days later, her brother Keith died of esophageal cancer, and Wournos received $10,000 from his life insurance policy. A few days after that, Wournos and Fell annulled their marriage after only 9 weeks since they exchanged vows. In August of that year, Wournos was ticketed and fined for drunk driving, and she used some of the money she got from her brother to pay that off and then blew the rest, including on a new car that she quickly wrecked. In 1978, at the age of 22, it is said that she tried to commit suicide by shooting herself in the stomach. And between the ages of 14 and 22, she had attempted to commit suicide at least a half dozen times. In May 1981, Wournos was arrested in Edgewater, Florida, for armed robbery of a convenience store, whereby she stole $35 and a couple packs of cigarettes. She was sentenced to prison in May 1982 and released about a year later. In May 1984, she was arrested again, trying to forge bad checks at a bank in Key West. And in November 1985, she was named as a suspect in the theft of a revolver and ammunition in Pasco County. In January 1986, Wournos was arrested in Miami and charged with car theft, resisting arrest, and obstruction of justice for providing fake identification. Miami police officers also found a .38 caliber revolver and a box of ammunition in the stolen car. In June 1986, Volusia County deputies detained Wournos for questioning after a male companion accused her of pulling a gun on him in his car and demanding $200. Wournos was found to be carrying spare ammunition, and police found a loaded .22 underneath the passenger seat that she had occupied. This may have been a practice run for later on robberies and murders that she committed. In 1986, a then 30-year-old Wournos met a 24-year-old female named Tyria Moore at a Daytona Beach gay bar called Zodiacs. This was depicted in one of the opening scenes in the movie Monster. They ended up moving in together, and Wournos supported Tyria through prostitution. In July 1987, Daytona Beach police detained Wournos and Moore at a bar for questioning after an incident occurred whereby they were accused of throwing a beer bottle, which resulted in an assault and battery charge. Starting in 1989, Wournos murdered 7 men during roughly a 1-year period. All the men were motorists that picked her up and were between the ages of 40 and 65. The first one was Richard Charles Mallory. As depicted in the movie Monster, Wournos alleges that Mallory beat her, raped her, and sodomized her after he drove her to an abandoned area. So she claims she killed him in self-defense. Mallory had in fact been convicted of attempted rape in the state of Maryland previously. 2 days after the murder, Volusia County Sheriff's deputies found Mallory's abandoned vehicle, and his body was found several miles away in a wooded area. He had been shot several times. David Andrew Spears was declared missing in May 1990. On June 1st, 1990, his naked body was found along U.S. Highway 19 in Citrus County. He had been shot 6 times by a .22 caliber pistol. Charles Edmund Carskadden is believed to have been murdered on May 31st, 1990. His body was found about a week later in Pasco County, and he had been shot 9 times with a .22 caliber weapon. The body had been wrapped in an electric blanket and was already badly decomposing when he was found. Witnesses later stated they saw Wournos with Carskadden's car, and Wournos also pawned a gun identified as belonging to the victim. Not too long after that, Peter Abraham Sims' vehicle was found on July 4th, 1990, in Orange Springs, Florida. Moore and Wournos were seen as abandoning the car, and Wournos' palm print was found on the interior door handle. Sims' body was never recovered. Troy Eugene Burris was reported missing on July 31st, 1990, and on August 4th, 1990, his body was found in a wooded area along State Road 19, located in Marion County. He had been shot twice. Charles Richard Dick Humphreys was a former state child abuse investigator and a former police chief. On September 12, 1990, his body was found in Marion County. The scene where he pulls out a police badge was depicted in the movie Monster, but Wournos killed him anyways. He was found fully clothed and had been shot 7 times in the head and torso. Walter Gino Antonio was a security guard and reserve police officer. On November 19, 1990, his nearly naked body was found near a logging road in Dixie County. He had been shot 4 times. 5 days later, his car was found in Brevard County. As shown in the movie Monster, on July 4, 1990, Wournos and Tyria Moore abandoned victim Peter Sims' car after they were involved in an accident. Witnesses saw them and gave police a description of the two. Police also found some of the victims' belongings at a local pawn shop, and Wournos' fingerprint was on one of the receipts. That matched the print left on Sims' car. On January 9, 1991, Wournos was arrested at the Last Resort Biker Bar, located in Volusia County, and police soon located Moore in the state of Pennsylvania. She agreed to elicit a confession from Wournos in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Moore then returned with police to Florida, where she was put up in a motel. Once again, I refer to the movie Monster. Those of you who have seen it know what I'm talking about. Under police guidance, Moore made numerous phone calls to Wournos. Moore, who was played by actress Christina Ricci, who also did an excellent job in that role, pleaded for help clearing her name. 3 days later, On January 16, 1991, Wuornos confessed to all the murders. But she claimed that all these men tried to rape her and that she only killed them in self-defense, when in all actuality, as depicted in the movie, it was probably only the first one, Richard Charles Mallory, that actually raped her and beat her. January 14, 1992, Wuornos went to trial for the murder of Richard Charles Mallory. He was the only one that she actually stood trial for, but she admitted to murdering the other ones. And a couple weeks later, she was found guilty in Mallory's murder with assistance of testimony from her former girlfriend, Moore. At her sentencing, psychiatrists for the defense testified that Wuornos was mentally unstable and diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, which has been a common theme in other serial killers. 4 days later, she was sentenced to death, in spite of these arguments. On March 31st, 1992, Wuornos pled no contest to the murders of Charles Richard Humphreys, Troy Eugene Burris, and David Andrew Spears, saying that she wanted to get right with God. In her statement to the court, she also clarified that I wanted to confess to you that Richard Mallory did violently rape me, as I've told you, but these others did not. They only began to start to, meaning that she believed that they might. However, there's no proof of that intention. It is believed that they were just going to pay her for sex when she decided to rob them and kill them. In June 1992, Wuornos pled guilty to killing Charles Edmund Caskoden, and in February 1993, she pled guilty to the murder of Walter Gino Antonio. No charges were brought against her for the murder of Peter Abram Sims, as his body was never found, and probably never will. In all, Wuornos received 6 death sentences. After her trial, she was then incarcerated in the Florida Department of Corrections, death row for women, to await her execution. She made appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1996, which was denied. And in 2001, she petitioned the Florida Supreme Court, stating that she wanted to terminate all pending appeals, and stated clearly, I killed those men, robbed them cold as ice. And I'll do it again, too. There's no chance in keeping me alive or anything, because I'd kill again. I have hate crawling through my system. I am so sick of hearing this she's crazy stuff. I've been evaluated so many times. I'm competent, sane, and I'm trying to tell the truth. I'm one who seriously hates human life and would kill again. Now, her attorneys argued that she was not mentally competent to make such a request. And I think most of us would agree. She was clearly mentally ill. In 2002, she began to accuse prison officials of putting stuff into her food and putting sonic pressure beams into her head, and that she was being tortured. She routinely went from being calm to quickly escalating and lashing violently out towards people. Prior to her execution, she said, a raped woman got executed. Thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass. According to some specialists, Wuornos' crimes were related to her psychopathic personality and her traumatic past. And so I'm sure that also damaged her psyche. And she was addicted to drugs and alcohol. All a bad mix. Did Aileen Wournos get dealt a bad hand? Absolutely. But lots of people get dealt a bad hand and are born and raised in horrible conditions and terrible circumstances, yet they are able to overcome their environment. So I think to say that she had no other choice is not accurate. Now, whether you agree or not with the death penalty, this was a very interesting case, taking into account the state of somebody's mind of whether they were sane or insane at the time of their actions. But in the state of Florida, they believe in enforcing the death penalty. Wuornos was executed by lethal injection on October 9th, 2002. She declined her last meal, which could have been anything under $20, and opted out for a cup of coffee. She was the second woman in Florida and the 10th to be executed in the United States since the 1976 United States Supreme Court restored capital punishment. But, of course, that is on a state-by-state basis. After her death, Wuornos' body was cremated, and her ashes were spread by a childhood friend in Michigan, the state that she was originally from. So as you know, I always try to have a positive message at the end of my videos. This is definitely a very sad story. I think the obvious thing we can learn is that prenatal and postnatal childcare is extremely important. I always felt it's kind of weird that you have to take a test to drive a car. You have to have some type of training, usually driver's ed school, and take a test to get your driver's license. Well, we have no such thing when you give childbirth. I always thought that was kind of strange. Now, it would be real hard to force people to go through these classes, but you could have incentives such as, free formula, maybe free diapers for the first year, something like that. as an incentive for young women and men to attend. So what I'm saying is it's extremely important to have a positive and nurturing environment as an infant and as a young child, even into teen years, to have good mental health, good nourishment, and I believe to be taught some good morals. What spirituality means. That could be religion for some, but just teaching what is right from wrong, because I think that's missing in a lot of young people today. And also the lack of parent supervision is very apparent. Again, I cannot emphasize how important it is to take care of the mind, body, and spirit. With that, this is Gabe Morales signing up for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.